Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the May 24th installment of the Go With The Flow NHL podcast brought to you by Let Me Be Frank Sports. Nick Phillips here, joined by my line mates, Kevin Bartman and Dan Maritz. And we're all wishing you all at home, all of our American listeners, a happy Memorial Day on Monday. Hope you get to spend some quality time with some family and friends and hopefully enjoy some nice weather. And obviously hope you remember what the day represents itself for our country. But Dan, Kevo, fellas, how we doing?
Not so bad, boys. How you guys doing?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Sorry about the absence last time, but I'm back.
Yeah, back and better than ever. And Dano, you're munching on something. I hope that's not going to be a distraction during the show. What you got there?
Oh, yeah. No, I apologize. I actually have Skittles. They're the American mix. They're all red, white, and blue. I thought I was muted. Okay. Well, that'll be my last munch. I apologize.
No, you didn't you didn't interfere with the show at all. But I think what we're going to do here, folks, is I know we're all eager to talk about the St. Louis-Boston Stanley Cup Final rematch, if you will, from 49 years ago. They last played in 1970, last Blues Stanley Cup appearance. But we're going to, first touch on a little off-ice news that transpired. A couple of quick, player acquisitions or potential acquisitions. Head coaching hire happened since we last convened, and then we'll just recap the two conference finals and give a Stanley Cup preview and do a little prediction. So I think we'll jump into the off-ice stuff. And the first bit of news is that Phil Kessel is available for trade. He's a point-per-game player this year, 31 years old, obviously part of those back-to-back Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins after being dealt from Toronto. It's a very interesting case. He signed through the 2021-22 season at an $8 million a year cap hit, annual average value for those at home, I guess who use that lingo. But Phil the Thrill is apparently available. And obviously Pittsburgh with a quick exit this year at the hands of the New York Islanders. Barry Trotz knocking them out in back-to-back years. So just initial thoughts. Who do you think is a good fit for him? We hear that Minnesota is potentially actively involved. It sounds like he's got some sort of list of teams he can veto a trade to or doesn't have the ability to. It's a little confusing, I guess, in that sense. But just general thoughts on the Penguins making Phil the Thrill available. Looks like Kevin wants to start us off.
It's honestly not terribly surprising to me. Like at some point or another, they're going to have to dump one of their bigger guys just because, that's how it goes in salary cap era. And then there's always rumblings about how he doesn't get along with maybe Mike Sullivan or some other members of that staff. So, like I said, not that surprising. I did see actually earlier today that he may be, like they asked him to put together a no trade list in Minnesota, I think is allegedly on there. So, oh, Jesus Christ, sorry. But
lay off the cigs, buddy. Jeez.
Sorry, there's rumors that he would, nix a trade to the Wild, actually, which is ironic because he's an alum of the University of Minnesota. But either way, it does make sense because, not Philly, Pittsburgh does have some younger guys who can put the puck in the net and, bring similar production as Kessel, such as Jake Gensel, or they'll probably find some other guy next year who does the same thing. So, it's interesting to see who is going to be in that mix for him because I think Toronto is actually still on the hook for some of his salary. So that might open up the window for some other teams who are a little more, crunched for cash right now. So, this will all unfold as the offseason continues. But, pretty interesting situation.
Yeah, I was going to bring up what you brought up, Kev, if you had left it out, that he might block the trade with the Wild due to him being able to veto things, Nick, as you said. I also found an article that suggested other names. Jack Johnson is listed along with Jason Zucker and Victor Rask, both on the Wild. As far as if the trade happened for Minnesota, obviously.
Who the fuck would want Jack Johnson for 4 more years? Who the fuck would want him? God, that'd be awful. That'd be an awful acquisition for any team.
But I was gonna say if he does go to Minnesota, I don't know if they have cheeseburgers that are as good as the ones in Pittsburgh, but they do have poutine, they do have hot dish, got some good beer. And as far as cities goes, actually the Twin Cities are pretty awesome. It's gonna be my new home in a little bit here. So there's worse places to play, I suppose. The fan base, obviously, the state of hockey. They love their hockey, so we'll see what happens. It's building up to be a good start to this off season. Hopefully there'll be a lot of interesting things that happens. It's nice to see that some off season moves have kind of already started before the playoffs have even ended. But yeah, we'll definitely keep an eye on Kessel and the rest of them for you folks listening at home, because that's going to be big news. Regardless of where he goes, it'll be big news. So be interesting to see how that sort of wraps itself up.
Yeah, Kevin was doing his little Phil Kessel impersonation of his own, being out of breath over there to start his little chat.
Dude, it's like there are such bad seasonal allergies. It's so hard for me to breathe. It's ridiculous. Went on a run yesterday and almost passed out, but anyways.
Yeah.
That sounds like Phil Kessel. Oh boy.
Yeah, right on cue. Yeah, it sounds like a tough scene over there, Kevin. Hate to see that. But yeah, Phil Kessel, I mean, he's a dynamic player. I mean, obviously there's question marks early in his career about, his commitment, to play a 200-foot game, but he's obviously a lethal scorer, and he's gotten a lot better in that regard. I just think it's a combination of he's on the wrong side of 30, and we've seen guys at his age, like Patrick Kane this past year, who can produce at 31 years old. But yeah, I mean, he's got a big cap hit, and he produced, but how many of those guys can you pay? I mean, you're already paying. You just extended Gensel. You got Crosby and Malkin locked up at pretty high, cap hits and with some term on there. So I kind of get why he's available. Maybe you need to shake things up after, the expectations are high in Steel City after a couple cups. So, losing a tough series to Washington, who was kind of a buzzsaw, was tough. But then, just getting, the floor wiped with you by the Islanders just can't really happen. So I can understand them trying to shake it up. But I think, a lot of teams should go after him. And the point you brought up, Kevin, I think is a solid one that, obviously he's got a list. So how many cap floor teams are really truly available or truly in contention to get him, because they might not have a choice to get him. I mean, if the salary owed to him is, I think, it's less than his actual cap hit. So for a team trying to reach the cap floor or a contender that wants to improve their team but can't really spend to the cap ceiling, he should certainly be a trade target. I mean, he doesn't have 5 or 6 years left. I mean, he'll be like 34, 35 when it ends. So I still think he's got some stuff left in the tank. So I think any team would be wise to look into it. I'm curious if Pittsburgh is going to try to trade him for an NHL proven forward, or if they're going to try to get some help on the blue line. Be interesting to see who the main centerpiece is there, because you could argue that they need to replace his scoring if he goes, but you could also argue that they could use a big old boost on the blue line as well after what happened to them against the Islanders. And speaking of the Islanders, just our last bit of, or I guess other than we could talk about Ralph Kruger briefly, but just a nice little transition to the Islanders. They extended Brock Nelson 6 years, $36 million. So quick math on that is a $6 million AAV. Real interesting times on Long Island. Or in Long Island. I saw a debate about that on Twitter, but I don't really want to get into that now. But Anders Lee, their captain, and Jordan Eberle are now also unrestricted free agents, and it was to be determined if they were going to be able to re-sign all three. But they obviously made Nelson a priority, or he came down to a price quicker than the other two that they wanted to sign. So any thoughts on Nelson? He kind of had his best year of his career so far, but I think he's a nice player. I think he's a good fit for the Islanders, but this isn't an insult to Brock Nelson, but I'm a little more interested to see how this affects Anders Lee and Jordan Eberle, because the Islanders, this is potentially the second year in a row they're going to lose their captain after Tavares left, and we all know Eberle's had an interesting career, but he definitely is a volume shooter. He can score, so two interesting players.
Yeah, I don't have too many thoughts other than, it's a good signing. honestly, Kev, I don't have too much with it. I just don't want to keep rambling on and on, repeating myself too much. So if you have thoughts more than I do, I mean, I'm happy for him and everything, but like I said, I don't have too much. So if you want to share your thoughts, maybe you got a little bit more to contribute than I certainly do.
I mean, we've talked in the past how it could be hard for the Islanders to keep players in Long Island, especially most recently John Tavares, he went out the door. So I guess it's main thing is you want to keep your best players. There's a whole lot of stuff outside of the actual on ice situation going on in Long Island right now, but they had a really good year, a huge surprise this year. No one really saw it coming, but they have a good team. Barry Trotz seems to have a good grip on that team. Get a little more continuity going forward, so you lock up Brock Nelson for the long term. But yeah, their cap situation is really interesting going forward. I'm looking at it right now. They have a lot of their bottom six guys, a lot of depth guys are going to be running up soon. Barzal is going to get quite a payday at the end of next season, so they got quite a little bit to figure out. Lou Lamoriello does, so yeah. But I guess the main thing is, it's nice to keep their players. Antonio is still young, could have a few more good years ahead of him. So I like the signing.
Very nice. And then if we want to touch on this very briefly as well, Ralph Kruger, who I believe was away from the NHL, former coach of the Edmonton Oilers. You can guess, but his record there was not very good. Obviously, because it was the pre-McClellan year where they made it to the playoffs. The only time they've made the playoffs since their Stanley Cup appearance against Carolina in 2006 with Chris Pronger and company. But yeah, Ralph Kruger, just another, I don't know how to call him a retread name, but just another, it's just another old hockey mind, joining the fold. And I just thought it was interesting. We had Kevin and I think one episode when Dan wasn't on the show with us doing something else. Fuck you, Dan. But okay. But
wow, thanks.
No, I love you. But one thing we had mentioned is that after what the Blackhawks did with Jeremy Colleton, and maybe teams are starting to look a little more analytical based, want a little bit of a younger voice behind the bench. Maybe we'll do some outside the box thinking. There's been a couple college coaches hired, obviously with Montgomery, Dallas, Quinn in New York, even Hackstall a couple years ago before he got shit canned going to Philly. I'm probably missing a couple, but not a big deal. But I forget things sometimes. But it's just another old hockey mind. Some teams, they have done the outside the box, thinking, but there's rumors Edmonton's looking at Dave Tippett, and who's Dan's all-time favorite coach, and God,
I love that guy. Sorry.
Yeah, Ralph Kruger, going to Buffalo. Just curious what we think the fit is here, or if there maybe there isn't one, but Eichel's getting kind of an old hockey mind instead of maybe a younger thinker, which is kind of interesting. But I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that, but if we want to touch on it briefly.
Well, it's an interesting hire to me just because he hasn't been in the NHL for a little while, like you mentioned, coaching over in England in Southampton for their football club, and didn't get a chance to get over there, by the way, when I was over there, sadly, but it's on the English channel, so it's probably a nice little setup for him. That being said, though, I mean, that's a pretty big switch from hockey to English Premier League football and then back to hockey. Sort of different breed of athlete. Obviously they're all professionals, whether you're in the NHL or in the Barclays Premier League, but just a different sort of, just a completely different sport, completely different sort of attitude. I could go on and on about, soccer and, all that stuff. I have a newfound respect since going over there and watching them play, but I still think they're a bunch of divers and a bunch of babies. But, now he's back in the hockey game. As far as coaching in the NHL goes, I've heard he's your player's coach, right? He's not necessarily like a Torts or I'm trying to think of other type coaches that, get really heated and yell at their players and scream and, all that stuff. He seems, from what I've heard, he's more the guy that tries to understand, you as an individual player. And then once he knows his players individually, then he can kind of make an assessment and start coaching from there. I also heard that he was walking around town asking fans what they thought the team needs in terms of improvement and whatnot. So, I mean, it's kind of an interesting perspective asking the fans, because you can get, some really well-educated hockey fans talking to you about, the team and what needs to be fixed. And then you can just get your absolute buffoon idiots that are, just foaming at the mouth, just waiting to vent. And so that was kind of interesting. I thought that's kind of what I've heard from him. So yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be an interesting change. I think, I'm excited to see what he can bring to the table. Especially he's been 2014 was when he left to go coach football, soccer over in England. So it's been five years, coming up on 6 years by the time mid-season rolls around next year. So Kev, what are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a total curveball from what I expected. Me and Nick, like you said, we talked a little while back that they could be thinking along the lines of one of these out of the box hires. And then it's Ralph Kruger, which I didn't even consider. To be honest, like when I first saw it, I was kind of, it's kind of a head scratcher. I didn't really get it. But then literally everything I've heard about him is like every sports analyst or, sports whatever figure would say, not the sexiest of hires, but Ralph Kruger is going to be really good in Buffalo. And, I guess I really have, no reason to doubt them because they probably know him better than I do. But yeah, and then also I heard some of the same things too, like real player coach. And I think that's really important with such a young group in Buffalo. And, there's experience we saw. They were super successful, got really hot at the beginning of the year, and then they just kind of fell off the face of the earth. So, maybe bringing a guy to sort of bring everything more together, bring more structure to the franchise. So, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a safe hire because you don't really know what you're getting, but I think it could turn out to be really, have a high payoff because of how much he seemingly cares about the team already. And, he seems really invested. And I think that's something you need when you have such a young group and, a franchise that's been hungry for success for such a long time.
Yeah, I think if I was a Buffalo fan, I'd be pretty excited. He's also known as like a defensive side. Like he airs more on the defensive side in terms of coaching, which I think will definitely help Buffalo.
Good for Dallas.
Obviously. Good yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, that exactly what, with such a young team, that's exactly who you look at is Dallas.
But their last coach was Phil Housley, who was also long.
True, yeah, but there's that weird thing with players that turn into coaches, and I'm not saying that Phil Housley's not a good coach, but there are so many former players that become coaches, and I think it's just really hard. Like, okay, Phil Housley's like a Hall of Fame defenseman, right? I think it's just really, really hard for those people, those players that are now coaches. I think it's really hard for them to basically pass their knowledge is kind of how I'm going to phrase it. Like you saw it with Wayne Gretzky too. Like he is the greatest, of all. There's no disputing that. And when he coached the Coyotes, granted the Coyotes sort of just stunk in general, but he didn't really add anything to the table in furthering the development of the team, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming at with Phil Housley. I'm not saying that it's all Phil Housley's fault. It's certainly not, because they were an absolute wagon at the beginning of the year, and then the wheels just fell off. So clearly the talent's there. The skill and the desire to win and all that's there. They just needed this past season a little bit bigger of a push, and I think they can get that with Kruger definitely over Housley. Housley had 2 years at Buffalo when he got canned already. So, I mean, obviously they were seeing something that they didn't like, or they weren't seeing something that they thought they were going to see with Phil, and so that's why they got rid of him. So it'll be an interesting change. Like I said, I'd be pretty optimistic, or at least, I'd go into it with an open mind if I was a Sabres fan. Clearly, like I said, something wasn't working with Housley, especially the second half of the season. So, a change has got to be made. They're one of those teams that kind of been in the basement as of late, and yada, yada, yada. So,
yeah. Yeah, and just one more quick note. I forgot to mention this in the intro. You guys blow me away with all your knowledge about Ralph Kruger. I did not know any of this, so props to you guys for doing your homework on this. But one thing I did know that I forgot to mention is that he was the head coach for Team Europe at the 2016 World Cup of Hockey, who lost to Team Canada in a 3-game series. So just, I guess he has briefly stepped back into the coaching realm since his soccer Premier League executive run. But yes, very interesting hire. Someone who kind of came out of left field, but the Sabres fans are in for maybe a treat. We'll see. So let's recap. We'll stay in the Eastern Conference. We're going to do a recap of the first two series, obviously the conference finals, and then we'll do our Stanley Cup preview, which is obviously the Bees and the Blues. Yeah, man, Carolina was kind of buzzing. And then they really just kind of fell apart. First game, they got off to a hot start, and then Boston just kind of comes back on them, and Boston never looked back. And, man, Boston completely outplayed them at home, and Mrazek just kind of melted down. And McElhinney, held his own, but, the backup was just, he's not good enough to fend off guys like Pasternak, Marchand, Bergeron. For extended periods of time. So yeah, I mean, once Boston had extended looks at him, they buried 4 in the clincher and stuff like that. So yeah, great run for Rod Brind'Amour and company, another former player who's a head coach we were just talking about. They had a great run, but Boston is kind of firing on all cylinders right now in the McAvoy suspension. I mean, shit, that could have really cost them, but man, they had a triumphant comeback in game 1, and they dominated. I mean, I don't really know much else to add other than that, but it was pretty impressive.
Play of Tuukka Rask too was just tremendous. I think a game 3 in that first period, that might have been some of the most exciting Carolina Hurricanes hockey I've ever watched. So the building was buzzing, the Canes were buzzing, they were shooting pucks left and right. I think the shots were 16-17 to 4 or something like that. Rask just absolutely stood on his head, and then you could kind of see it coming. You're like, shit, they didn't bury anything in the first period. Their chances are gone. Boston has, with the intermission, they've got a little bit more time to recuperate, and sure enough, Boston pots one, then they get the second one, and you're kind of just, at least I was sitting at my couch at home and just going, yeah, this game's over. The second Boston got that first goal, you just kind of knew. Also, getting Justin Williams off of his game, I think was a big, I don't think it was a key thing, because I think Boston was going to win. I think all 3 of us had Boston anyway. I think I had Boston in 6. Boston's just too skilled for them, and their veteran team. Whereas Carolina was kind of riding the high. You knew the high was going to go away at some point. They kind of reminded me of the 2009 Chicago Blackhawks, where they're just a bunch of running around playing hockey, not really knowing what's going on, not necessarily knowing that they're in a conference final, and just kind of riding that high. And then they meet a more skilled veteran team. For the Canes, it was the Bruins. For the Hawks, it was the Detroit Red Wings. A lot of parallels there. So as a Canes fan, I'd be really excited. They're looking pretty good going into next year. I'd be excited to see them back in the playoffs. But yeah, anyway, my point with Justin Williams is how uncharacteristic it was for him to just lose his head.
Really come back. Him,
yeah,
come back too. We'll see.
Yeah, and I mean, it was three penalties in game 3 or in game 4, whatever. Well, I can't remember what it was, but he was in the box so much, and that's really not like him. He gets the reputation of Mr. Game 7. He's Mr. Clutch, all that. He's your captain, and he really let Krug get under his skin. Krug did a great job of kind of goading him into penalties. Marchand was doing it. He did the captaincy. He told him to go to the penalty box and everything. Marchand just being Marchand. And they did a really good job of getting him off his game, because when he's on his game, he's the one that's scoring big time goals. He's the one that's setting up guys for clutch moments. And they sort of got him off his game. So yeah, that's sort of my assessment as a whole. But the play of Tuukka Rask, I just hope for his sake and for the Boston Bruins sake that this 11-day layoff, I understand there'll probably be some rest, but it's good that they're getting rest. Chara can heal up, but I hope that rust, he can shake that off really quickly, because the Blues are going to be coming fierce, trying to steal one on the road in game 1. So
yeah, both series for me were kind of a slow death for both the Hurricanes and the Sharks, and I think it's just sort of a matter of they sort of ran out of gas and ran out of bullets because, either team was so banged up. They lost key guys, and particularly the Sharks. Like that was, I remember Nick was ready to gamble on Game 6. He had quite a bit of money on the Sharks, but wasn't quite aware of the major subtractions from the lineup with Carlson and Thomas Hertl and Pavelski.
Let's clarify something here.
Huh?
Yeah, let's clarify something here. I did gamble. I put about $100 down. This is complete facts. I had the Sharks money line as high as plus 170, them winning in regulation, the three-way money line at plus 265, and the reverse puck line at plus 450. The odds were it was just good odds. Like, I just thought maybe something for Jumbo Joe. There's a little bit of some divine intervention that was going to take place, but there wasn't. And so I'm eating ramen noodles the rest of the week. But yeah, but I underestimated the injury situation. I thought there was a lot of mind games and guys just getting maintenance, but no, they were really and truly injured. So yeah.
And I think it's not, karma's not the right word for it, but like San Jose had gotten so many bounces and so many calls. It was getting to a point where it was just ridiculous and a little too much. But throughout the playoffs, they got every call going their way. So, they've kind of been limping, so to speak, to where they got. And then I guess they sort of just ran into a really hot team that's playing really well. And even in that series, that Game 3, it was Game 3, right? Or was it Game 4? Game 4.
Game 3.
No, Game 4 was the hand pass, the overtime hand pass.
No, that was Game 3. Wait.
That was Game 4.
That was Game 3. Wasn't it Game 3?
It was Game 4 because after that, then they went and won in San Jose. Because that play happened Game 4.
5-0 in Game 5.
Huh?
It was Game 4 was the hand pass, and they blanked them 5-0.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So yeah, I'm like that speaks a lot to St. Louis. Sorry, because I feel like a lot of teams would maybe fold a little bit after such a tough call like that, and then have to go on the road and beat a good team. But they did just that, and pretty much, as funny as it is, after that hand pass, after that goal, it was pretty much domination by St. Louis. So it's going to lead into a good final, but I feel like it's going to be hard to gauge. It's hard to gauge the Bruins for me because they've had somewhat of an easy road. They didn't have to play Tampa. They ran into a really young and inexperienced Carolina team. So they're still a really good team, but I really like St. Louis, as hard as it is to say. I'm kind of stumbling over my words because I just can't really believe it. But yeah.
Yeah, it'll be a good final. That turning point with the hand pass, like you're saying, Kev, the bounces, the 5-minute major on Cody Eakin, which led to them scoring 4 power play goals, getting back in the game against Vegas in Game 7. The offsides call with Landeskog and all that, and then the hand pass. It was kind of just like, holy smokes, guys! Like, there are a lot of people that are, the NHL's rigged all that, and that's not the case. That's just false. But when you get 3 calls like that in 3 separate playoff series, you start to scratch the back of your head, like, what is going on? Can we just get a series without any controversy where the refs are they do their job, they go home, nobody really talks about them. So now it looks like we won't have to because San Jose's not in it. But yeah, it was just, like you said, it's just kind of the luck ran out, call it what you will. You can look at it in different ways. It was a lucky call for the major, but they still had to score 4 goals to get the lead. The Landeskog rule, it's kind of a stupid rule, but it was offsides. But it's not, and then the hand passes, they really need to change that rule, which the NHL will, I think, this offseason. They need to just make all playoff overtime goals reviewable by Toronto. It should just immediately go to Toronto as a review. Because that was a blatant hand pass, and we've been over it. I can, it's beating a dead horse and all that. But, I think the right teams are definitely in it. St. Louis is absolutely motoring right now. That hand pass, like I said, and like you said, Kev, was the turning point in that series. And Boston's looking really good. They were looking a little banged up against Columbus. Pasternak looked a little banged up. He doesn't anymore. None of the guys really do. I know Char was, but like I said, with that rest, that's going to be perfect for him, especially at his age. You know, he's getting older, getting a little slower. Things take a little bit more time to heal. That 11-day off, 11-day off break. That's going to be huge for them coming up on Monday. So I'm just excited for another year of Stanley Cup Finals, boys. It's going to be great.
I think I saw real quickly on that. I want to say I saw the stat is the team in the last 13 years, the team going into the final who had the most rest out of the two is 3-10 in the Stanley Cup Finals. So
really, okay.
Yeah, it was Bill Plaschke on Around the Horn. So if that's wrong, that's on Bill Plaschke, not me. But that's kind of jaw dropping because you'd figure in a game like hockey, like I can see it either way, like rest versus rust, that type of thing. It is a long break though, and when you have a team that's playing really well, you like to get out there and keep things going. But it's also nice to heal up, especially when you have a team that's banged up a little bit, like the Bruins. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting to talk about, and I think Nick's got to bring us into the final, right?
Oh yeah, I'm going to bring you into the final, but I had one last point I wanted to bring up real quick. Is that this is a real interesting offseason coming up for the Sharks. So this is from Dennis Bernstein of the Fourth Period. He brings up that he goes, now what, Sharks? Pavelski's a pending UFA. Joe Thornton's a pending UFA. Obviously might not even come back to the league in general. Erik Karlsson, obviously, one of the premier unrestricted free agent defenseman on the market. He's a free agent, unrestricted. Gustav Nyquist, who they acquired midseason, UFA. Donskoy, UFA. Heed and Haley, UFAs. And then as far as the draft goes, in 2019, they have no first or second round pick in this upcoming draft in Vancouver. No first in 2020. They lose their 2021 second if Erik Karlsson does re-sign with them. And then if they re-sign Nyquist, they lose their 2020 second. So I don't want to make it sound – what?
Oh, I was just saying, ouch. That's a lot of future that is burnt out, possibly.
Oh, right. And I don't want to say that the future is, bleak. Obviously you still got Burns, you still got Couture, but they've got some question marks there. And I think we kind of saw Martin Jones ride a bit of a roller coaster, right? In this playoffs, he was really shitty against Vegas, really stepped up. He had his moments against Colorado where he was both equally great and shitty. And then, St. Louis, when Erik Karlsson got kind of banged up and the Sharks were kind of running on fumes on the blue line, he didn't step up and make a couple big saves where they needed him to. And yeah, he obviously got kind of shelled a little bit, kind of like target practice for the Blues there at times. I mean, they were just so dominant on the puck. Just think the possession numbers would probably back up at least what I thought I saw with my two eyes, but they sometimes mislead me. Just to set it up, we alluded to it earlier. You already know it if you're a hockey fan, but we've got the St. Louis Bruins. Holy shit, folks. It's been a long day.
Tough
it is
scene.
The St. Louis Blues and Boston Bruins. that was fucking awful. Wow. Boston Bruins, St. Louis Blues. We got to give credit where credit's due to Kevin Bartman. Nailed it. At least someone got half their bracket. Someone got one representative of the Cup, right? I think we were all kind of riding Tampa, in the East. Obviously, Boston made it. And then I think Dan had Calgary and I had Vegas, if I remember correctly. But Kevin is on the St. Louis Blues. I'm going to let you guys do your previews and predictions of the series first. And, then I'll, I guess, come in at the end. I'm just curious what you guys have to say about this first, because I have some thoughts on it, but I'm very interested to hear what you guys have on it. So props to Kevin. I'll let him start. I'm assuming he's going to stick with the Blues on this one, but maybe he's got to change the heart, but we'll see.
So I've kind of tossed this around in my mind for quite some time, because even while the Sharks Blues is still going on, I figured that the Blues were going to come out of it. They were just a better, more healthy team. But I'm still going to go St. Louis Blues. That's going to be a prediction. They're going to be the Stanley Cup champs. This might be a hot take, Dan. So I'm a Hawks fan.
I'm ready for it. You always have them. You always have them anyway. I wouldn't expect that.
So I'm a Hawks fan, right? I hate the Blues. That's the thing, though, actually. I don't really hate the Blues. Like, they're our rival, the Blackhawks rival, technically. it's just for whatever reason, I've never really seen them as a rival because we've been so much better than them, in the last decade. So it's been hard for me to hate them. I like beating them, but I like beating everybody. But then like Bruins fans, just I hate them. I hate all Boston fans to a point where I want to see them lose. I want to see all Boston team success just stop. So that has maybe a little bit to do with my pick, but I just also think the Blues are a much better team. Jordan Binnington is sick. Like I talked at the beginning of the playoffs, how he just kind of has that, cold-blooded killer, ice water in his veins, that type of mentality. Like you see all those gifs of him at the end of games, huge moments, huge overtime goals. He just could not seem to care less, just taps his stick against the post and, goes on and enjoys the boys. So joins the boys. Yeah. So, it's just up and down too. They're getting more scoring, you know, up and down their lineup. Not to say that Boston isn't, because they are, but um, St. Louis has quite a few hot hands. Tarasenko, I think in the last series, he was the only player to have a point in every game. Jaden Schwartz is probably he could, have an average cup final. And if St. Louis wins, he's probably going to win the Conn Smythe. He's just been unreal. I think 12 goals is what he's up to at this point. Defensively, they just play defense so well together. It's not the most talented group. They do have some good guys. You got Colton Parayko, Pietrangelo. You got some good players, but they just play so well together. Um, as a unit, they're all pretty much on the same page at all times. They can shut down their main guys, and that's what they're gonna have to do. They're gonna have a tough task. That first line of Bergeron, Pastrnak, and Marchand. It's going to be tough. And then, like I said, Boston has a lot of depth too. Lines 1 through 4, they have guys who can put the puck in the net, and they, run a pretty nice system under Cassidy. So it's going to be a high scoring series, believe it or not. Even though Rask is playing unreal, Binnington's playing unreal. They both shown that they've had, their flaws in this postseason and in past postseasons in Tuukka Rask's case. So I expect it to be a high scoring series just because you have so much speed, so much talent, a lot of high volume scores on either team. So I'm still going to pick St. Louis. They're playing more consistent. Boston's had its highs and lows. They've had some shaky moments throughout this entire run, but St. Louis has been pretty even keeled the entire time. So I'm going to take the St. Louis Blues in 6 games. That's what I got.
All right. Well, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to say Titletown still resides in Boston for a little bit longer, as much as it sort of pains me to say, because I'm basically on the same page. There's some Bostonians that I do like fellow NHL podcaster R.A., Mike Grinelli. But honestly, it kind of stops there. It's like those two, just because I listen to the Spit and Chicklets podcast. But Boston fan, I'm kind of sick and tired of seeing the kid. I mean, we've had a good run in Chicago with what?
You like the Witt dog? We got.
Oh yeah, Witt, but yeah, Witt's not like a awesome, but he's not. Yeah, I love all of them, but I'm sick and tired of seeing the kid that's got the banner, and it's like, I'm 13 years old, and there's been like 8 championships. By the way, since
I hate that kid.
I know, but since I've been born in. If you want to count
McGillicuddy, baby.
If you want to count like the Jordan era Bulls and the stupid White Sox, like Chicago hasn't done that bad either. Like it's 3 NBA championships, 3 Stanley Cups, 2 baseball championships. So it's like 8 in my lifetime, and I'm 25. So like Chicago's been doing a pretty good job too. But I'm just sick and tired of seeing that stupid poster. But that being said, Kev, unlike you, I cannot root for the Blues. I refuse to root for them. Actually, there's only 2 people that I will concede this. There are 2 people that I'd be extremely happy for if the St. Louis Blues win the Stanley Cup. The first person is Pat Maroon. Love that guy. I loved him when he was on the Ducks, when he was on the Oilers. Now he's played for his hometown team, who took a huge pay cut to be with his son and his wife and kid. And the other person is the little girl, Layla, I think her name is. She's the one that had
I was going to touch
that really,
on that.
really rare disease. If the listeners at home haven't heard it, it's definitely something you need to look up. It's going to tug at your heart. But she had some sort of either cancer or very rare disease. Either way, she had to have a bone marrow transplant. It was successful. She's on the road to recovery. As I understand it, she'll be totally fine. But she couldn't leave the house for like 4 or 5 months. And finally, her mom, she was healthy enough to go out. And her first game, unfortunately for her, was the Game 3 hand pass game. But after that, she's been to every St. Louis Blues game, so I'm sure she'll be there for games 3 and 4. And I think there will be a Game 6. I think there will be a Game 7. I'm going Boston in 7 with this one. So those two would be the two that I would be happy for, just because it's a good, humanity sort of moment, just a feel-good story. But yeah, Kev, I cannot root for the Blues because unlike you, I do hate the Blues and their fans a little bit. But more importantly than how I feel,
Nick, did you not hear Dan at all, too? Yeah. I thought.
No, you got after the Layla thing, you totally went silent on us, buddy. Is your mic fucking off?
Yeah, you can't. We still can't hear you.
Go straight out of your phone.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I guess I'm just going to have to do it this way.
Do your rant after. Also, we're at like 42 minutes or so, Kevin.
We can just wrap it up after Dan.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up after Dan. But Dan, you got to finish. You were talking about Layla, and then I don't know where you went after that. Kevin will figure it out. But sorry to put that on Kevin. But yeah, go ahead, man.
Okay, sorry. All right, Kev. First off, it's 42 minutes 30 seconds as of right now.
Okay.
You can hear me. You can hear me okay right now, yeah?
Perfectly.
Okay, cool. All right, so Layla. Okay. Shit, this is gonna be tough because I don't know exactly where I got cut off. All right, I'll just 3, 2, 1. So yeah, those are the really the only two I'm going to be rooting for. I think this is going 7. I think it's going to be Boston in 7. I really want to see 7 games anyway. It's the Stanley Cup Finals. The more hockey I see, the better. But I just really think the veteran talent for Boston is going to kind of outshine St. Louis. I think Tuukka Rask is going to be okay despite the break. But I think the break is going to benefit a guy like Zdeno Chara, who was a little banged up against the Hurricanes, and they're definitely going to need him to kind of muck and grind in the corners on defense, and all that. And then as far as Brad Marchand goes, the target that I'm going after this series is Jordan Binnington. I'm going to do everything I can if I'm Brad Marchand to get under that guy's skin, try and get him off his game, maybe get inside the defense's head a little bit. Just be the rat that he is, and I think he's going to have no problem doing that. He never has a problem getting under guys' skin. Same thing with Torrey Krug too. He can really, we saw him get under a veteran player's skin. Justin Williams, a guy that you really don't think has, kind of the attitude to break and kind of lose his game and lose his cool. So I think it's just that veteran stuff. They know how to win. I think, both buildings are going to be extremely tough to play in. But I wouldn't be surprised at all if by game 5, it's 2-2. But yeah, I think this is going 7. I think it's going to be the Bruins. I think that top line for Boston is just going to be a little too tough for them to stop. Bergeron, like you said, Bergeron, Pasta, and Martin. Yeah. I think, and that fourth line's really good too for Boston. That's the thing. Both teams have just a super strong lineup from top to bottom. And so I think both teams are equally matched pretty much. Both goalies are playing well. Defense is phenomenal. The team defense. Offense, we talked about Schwartz and obviously the top line for Boston. I think it's super duper even. So there's got to be an X factor somewhere. And I think that X factor right now is kind of the veteran presence in the Boston locker room. And then just, with Brad Marchand, he's got that X factor that gets guys off their games. And I don't really think the Blues have a guy quite like that. And so that's kind of where I'm giving the edge to. But I could definitely see the Blues winning this too, winning their first cup in franchise history. 7 games, Boston.
Yeah, real quickly, I'll give my prediction. But first, just a couple interesting tidbits. I mentioned earlier, first time Blues have been in the Stanley Cup since 1970. They coincidentally actually played Boston, where Bobby Orr scored that overtime goal where he flies through the air, kind of one of the more iconic moments in NHL history. David Backes, longtime St. Louis Blue, will be facing his old club, so probably a bittersweet moment for him to see St. Louis get to the hockey promised land, or almost there. Reach the biggest stage at the very least, after putting a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into that organization. That's another one. And then actually, Jordan Binnington, as of last year, was put on loan to the Providence Bruins. And he actually played goalie in Providence at the AHL level for Boston's affiliate. He was still St. Louis property, but Doug Armstrong and Don Sweeney actually worked out a little deal where Binnington got some time between the pipes because they just didn't have room for him down in the Blue system, I guess. So actually, Jordan Binnington a year ago, or whenever the hell their AHL, their Calder Cup playoff run ended, was actually playing for the Providence Bruins. So just fun little couple facts I thought I'd bring up. Obviously, we missed out on Jumbo Joe playing the Bruins, but is what it is. So I'm with Dan on this one. I'm going Bruins in 7. Two really good goaltenders. Both have cracked before. I mean, Tuukka's got more of a resume on him. So obviously we've seen him go through the highs and lows. Binnington's, in his rookie year, stuff like that. But so we haven't really seen him crumble too much. As mentioned before, he bounced back in a big way after letting up 6 to Winnipeg in that first round series that they obviously won. But I'm all in on the Bergeron line right now. I think Bergeron is a man on a mission. I'm going to have a really hot take here, but I think you can make the argument he is the best player in hockey right now, in the sense that he just the all-encompassing what he does. And he's a Selke caliber forward. I think if you put that guy on at defenseman, he would be just a top 4 guy. Like, he's so sick. He's scoring at will. He makes his line mates so much better. Like, if you look at the data, like, they just don't score when he's on the ice. He's such a difference maker. Like, he lights it up on the power play, lights it up 5-on-5. He fucking frustrates the shit out of the top forwards on the other team. He's just buzzing right now. Marchand, DeBrusk, Pasternak. I think if one goalie's going to crack, it's going to be Binnington. And that's kind of what it boils down to for me. Correct me if I'm wrong. I think Boston has home ice here. Can someone correct me if I'm wrong? I think Boston.
They do.
Yeah, Boston's got home ice. So, yeah, I think Boston wins the cup in 7. It would be a real shame to see the Blues lose a heartbreaking Game 7. You'd hate to get some extra hockey to end the year, but also see the Blues go through some heartbreak. But no, the Blues have a lot of depth. I mean, the Blues have their own version of Bergeron in a way, and Ryan O'Reilly. Obviously, no one would put them on the same echelon, but they have a very, they've got really experienced NHL experienced forwards that down the middle too. Guys like Bozak and O'Reilly, Tarasenko and Schwartz are lighting it up. For them, so it's going to be real interesting. I think it really hinges on Binnington. Yeah, Pietrangelo and Parayko are great, but Boston's got depth. St. Louis has got depth. I mean, I think the keys here is which goalie's going to crack first or doesn't crack first. And I think the bottom pairing defensemen need to really step up for both teams. And we've seen guys like Grzelcyk and Clifton play big roles for Boston. It'll be really interesting to see how it works for St. Louis. But I'm going to go, and this isn't because I'm a Hawks fan. I just think the home ice advantage and the experience of Tuukka Rask, I think, kind of does it for me. I'm going to go with Boston in 7. That's our show, guys. So, Kevin got the Blues. Dano's got the Bruins. I'm on the Bruins. We'd like to thank you all for listening, and we'll be dropping an episode next week in the middle of the final. So Memorial Day in the United States on Monday is the game 1 of the Stanley Cup Final, and we'll probably jump in sometime around game 2, game 3, kind of see how the series goes a little bit, and we'll chime in with our thoughts on that and any other NHL news that goes on. So, Dan, Kevin, anything else, or hit the road for the night?
No, I think we're good. Everybody enjoy the playoffs. Blues fans, Bruins fans, hope your hearts don't jump out of your chest literally, but enjoy the ride for what it's worth, win or lose. And we'll see you guys in the next episode.
Yeah, see you guys later.
All right, bye, boys.
All right, peace out.